We've been having some difficulty lately keeping up with all of the user suggestions and getting videos out for the users and the commenters. Suggesting specific.
We've had a lot of awesome articles come our way.
Yeah,
so far.
I think we've missed a few, unfortunately, but we're definitely trying to keep up with what you guys suggest. And a YouTube commenter by the name of YY4Me133, he put forward this on our video regarding atheists and how they're driven by compassion.
Right.
And he noted that apparently doctors, and so this article by Austin Klein notes that a recent study of doctors, those who prescribe themselves as atheist, agnostic, or simply not religious, were actually a little more likely than religious doctors to help poor or uninsured people, as far as maybe breaking the rules a little bit to help them, or doing it pro bono, and so on and so forth. And the point that this article makes is that if religion is necessary for morality and moral behavior, then why would these results be found where the non-religious are actually basically in line? And it was more, but it's a very small margins, but they're basically in line with the religious. And so it does suggest that that side of morality does not need to be religious-based.
Well, this is what we brought up when we did the article about the how religious people are less motivated by compassion. Atheists are, on average, more compassionate, basically, the study found. And the thing that I said at the time, and I think this still bears out, is that if religion were really this thing that inspired morality and inspired people to be better, the numbers wouldn't even be close. It would be like 80% religious people are awesome and driven by compassion, and atheists would be like almost zero. It would be like 10% or less.
Yeah.
But that's not what you see at all, and I think that totally throws sand in the face of the claims of religious people, that religion makes us better.
It has this aspect of not saying that, well, the atheist doctors or whatever are better than the non-religious doctors.
They're the
it's
same.
just showing that they're humans, and they. But this article does actually go into, first let's note that 35% of non-religious doctors, that was the number, where it was only 31% for religious doctors, so they're which ones were willing to help. So the margin is really, really close.
Sure.
But 54% of the doctors that had been surveyed that believed in God believed that God intervenes in the patient's health in the course of their treatment.
Well, why do you have a job then?
54%.
Wow.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the point.
Why do we need you?
That's the point of this that I wanted to get into, because right here, this gentleman, Richard Sloan, I believe from the Chicago Sun-Times, mentions specifically, if it's a personal belief, then they are, of course, free to adopt it. No one should be expected to always make scientific assertions all the time. But I'm concerned about whether such beliefs will affect the sort of care they give. If some supernatural being intervenes to help a person's health, no matter what the doctor does, then does it really matter what the doctor does?
Right.
That's exactly what you were just commenting.
Right.
And so then you get into the faith healing realm and this idea of well, if you're a doctor and you really believe that these things happen, then it's what I worry about is actually malpractice and all that's kind of a big issue, right?
Sure.
And so if you make a mistake as a doctor and shrug it off to God's will, well, there was really nothing I could do.
This medicine usually works, but apparently God wanted you to lose your leg or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the wrong place to take your mentality as far as analyzing what mistake you may have made on a case or things like that in order to serve your next patient.
I wonder how many doctors who believe this way actually vocalize that to their patient.
Well, that was, again, something else that this article kind of goes into, is that because of religious issues or finding certain treatments against their religion, these doctors, 71% of them believe that they must refer patients to another doctor for treatment. So
this is 71% of the 54% who said that they think God takes an active hand, or this is 71% of doctors?
This is 100% of religious doctors.
Okay. All right.
71% of them will actually refer patients to another doctor for treatment that they don't morally agree with.
Right.
And slightly more than half of the rest of them said that they felt no such obligation, such that they would not refer them to anyone. They would just decline.
They would just tell them, you're not getting that procedure.
Exactly. And they wouldn't even...
Or they would never offer it.
Exactly. So
that is some irresponsible.
Particularly Protestants and Catholics were much less likely to feel obliged to tell patients about controversial treatments or refer them to other doctors. So if they didn't agree with it, they would bow out. And so this is a different study that shows that aspect of, if you don't, if you believe that, or you let your religious beliefs affect how you actually treat your patients. And so it was exactly as that gentleman was saying. His fear was like, well, how do you make your medical decisions? So the whole article is essentially trying to be about you need to, this actually study came from a medical ethics journal.
Right.
So anyway, that...
when I had somebody ask me, well, probably more than one person of all the people who I've talked to over the course of being a very vocal atheist, but I had somebody ask me not too long ago, what's the harm? If I have my belief and I'm not pressing it on anyone else, like, what's the harm? Like, well, here's a possible harm right here.
Exactly.
When doctors don't even offer you some kind of care that could, save your life, like if you're a woman and you're at this point where if you don't have an abortion, you're going to die, or I don't know what the other controversial procedures, might be. But whatever it is, like if doctors aren't offering you care that could save your life or improve your life, and they're not telling you that it's a possibility because they have some kind of disagreement with it, that's a harm.
Yeah.
That's something that's being forced on the patient. Yeah, it really is. And they don't feel the need to refer you to somewhere else. I mean, it's just, I think that's really despicable.
Yeah. Well, especially from a doctor who, you put your trust in this person and God forbid you really like their personality and so on and so forth. So when
you
they
trust
say
them,
there's nothing else that they can do, even though it's just a procedure that they don't agree with. I mean, I actually had the same issue. My wife mentioned that in the Philippines with the birth control issue, there's actually a great many doctors that when like women go to the doctor to request birth control, great many doctors will not only decline them completely, but they'll like do things like try and basically blacklist them from doctors in the area, and they'll also religiously reprimand them and be like, well, how dare you, this is against God. Like they'll actually, in their advisement and assessment of their patient, they'll be like, this is against God, what's wrong with you? They'll basically play the doctor and the priest, and it's like, man, that's the most horrible thing you could do. And
mind your own business.
Well, and especially as a doctor, the first do no harm, aspect of it, and that's the whole point. You're not supposed to willingly be like, something that could help you, but because I don't agree with it, I'm not going to mention it to you, and I'm not going to send you to another doctor who might mention it to you. I'm just going to tell you you're out of options.
Right. That's it.
We've
expended everything that we can do. Yeah.
As simple as you can put it.
Yeah.
Now, this also extended to something else that I found interesting, and this may, put ire in the other direction as far as how atheist doctors behave. But they also, a separate study noted that atheist doctors are almost twice as likely to take decisions that speed up death for very ill patients as those who are deeply religious, as compared to those who are deeply religious.
Okay.
So those with a strong faith are less likely to discuss treatments that will hasten the end of their life.
Right.
This was in Britain again, and it was a poll of 4,000 British doctors. Mm-hmm. So they'll avoid things like atheist doctors and non-religious doctors are more likely to use tactics like deep sedation, where they just allow their patient basically to go into a coma until their body gives out, so that they're not awake and suffering like through the pain of it.
So like somebody has like really agonizing cancer, and the doctor says, okay, this is an option that we have, and it's dangerous and it could kill you. But this sounds to me like a bonus, because it sounds like the doctors are doing this in cases where they're trying to prevent suffering.
Oh yeah,
it doesn't sound like people are not being informed.
Right.
It sounds like they're not trying to extend the life and therefore the suffering of somebody who's basically under a fairly immediate 6-month or whatever death sentence.
Right.
They're not.
But that does fly in the face of like the Christian ideology of like suffering on earth is
suffering is good. Right.
That life is sacred. So suicide or committing suicide or helping someone commit suicide is murder and all of the above. So those three things all affect each other. Where you can't allow someone to help them die by giving treatments, because they did seem to describe that there were some treatment options that they would use that would basically be like, if we use a certain amount of painkillers, basically, then you will die. If we use a certain type of painkillers, it will affect your liver, and then everything will shut down sooner. And
right.
But you'll be not in pain. Like those kinds of options, and
it's the kind of option I want.
Well, and I agree with that completely.
Especially if I'm already on my way out. If I have 2 weeks to live, and they're like, every moment is going to be awful agony. Like, well, I'd rather sort of be in a drugged stupor than eventually slip away a little faster. I mean, what's the point?
When you've lived for 78 years, and the next 2 weeks are just going to be hell on earth, why? Why bother?
And I guess I'll go ahead and put myself out there. I actually don't know like what the popularity of this is going to be, but like I think a person has the right to decide when they want to die.
Well, I agree.
I think if you're in this situation where you're even if you're not old, but your life is just like taken on some horrific, painful aspect, and it's going to be how it is. You're just going to be in agony for every moment. I mean, your end of life decision should be your own, and I don't understand. I don't understand the imposition that no, you have to continue to live.
Yeah.
The rest of society or the government or religious institutions, we have decided for you. You must continue to live. And this is one of those things that kills me. I'm going to get on my political soapbox for a second. This kills me about Republicans who always constantly seem to be like, no, we want less government and smaller government and government out of our lives and not telling us what to do. And yet they're the ones stopping us from having rights over a woman's right to choose. They don't want that, and they don't want people having the right for like their end of life decision and things like that. These are the people who, they want to put prayer back in school and force all of our children to pray to the same God, that they designate. And I'm like, how is this not the government that you apparently hate imposing on our lives? It's just imposing on our lives in the way you want it to.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm done now.
No, that's fine. It's absolutely true. I mean, this was an interesting case because it's taking case in Britain, and so they were actually talking about they're working on assisted dying and euthanasia legislation there to try and give you that right again, put that right legally back to you. I mean, there are legal issues with it because of then life insurance has to pay up that much sooner and things like that.
Right.
And whether life insurance can pay if you elect to go early because of cancer, or in order to earn your life insurance, you have to suffer. Who knows? But so they're trying to work out those legalities, which is interesting. But also,
those kinds of legalities to me are way more worthwhile to talk about.
Agreed.
Than like my imaginary friend will be sad if you kill yourself.
Exactly. Agreed. And it's nice to see, even the British is moving that direction, because I think that's one of the things that we haven't been talking about for a long time here that needs to come back is euthanasia and assisted, death scenarios, because a lot of people with the technology that we have, people live so much longer now that they get to these points where your body is literally just decaying away from your skeleton.
It's just shutting down and turning off.
Everything's just dying.
The game is over.
And why do you have to suffer while dealing with that?
Great Britain is, I think, so much more progressive than the United States. And the fact that, we would not even be able to talk about this in the United States. The politicians would lose their minds and would just go on the warpath. And what would we get? We would get people like Sarah Palin being like, death panels, and they're going to decide when you die. I think this is not the case at all. Yeah. But, it's how can we fearmonger? How can we get out there and scare people? And, oh well.
Well, one last point on that is actually nice. Again, nice that what Britain's got going on is that doctors do actually risk their careers if they ignore the terms of living wills under which patients can demand to be allowed to die if they become too ill to speak, eat, or drink.
Right.
So they do have some aspect of the DNR situation of
you must respect that. Yeah.
But not just do not resuscitate, but also if I'm go vegetable coma status, that you have to disconnect me from the ventilator or so on and so forth. So they do have a lot more progressive stance on that. So maybe it's coming here. So it's just something to think about.
Well, I hope that's not a problem of doctors ignoring the patient's the written instructions. That's actually kind of horrifying to me.
It apparently kind of is, because even what they noted is the religious doctors are much more likely to not even have to not even discuss end of life options for terminally ill patients.
But it sounds like they're saying they're also more likely to ignore your written instructions of do not resuscitate or do not use, I think they call them heroic efforts.
It doesn't seem to imply that they have data for that. They're just noting that doctors do risk their careers if they do choose to ignore that.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that just put the thought in my head that if they have to specifically say, doctors can lose their license if they ignore, the end-of-life decision that the patient has made. It makes me feel like it's happened.
It probably has happened. This article just doesn't discuss, to what degree.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's food for thought, definitely.